Democratic National Convention is set to start in a few hours when Vice President Kamala Harris and Minnesota Governor Tim Walz will be formally nominated as the party's candidates in the November elections. Ms. Harris herself will deliver a speech on Thursday. Now, this will focus on the adoption of the party platform, of which a draft has been released. The platform focuses on a broad range of issues, such as lowering inflation, mitigating climate change, and tackling gun violence. Ahead of that, dozens of prominent Democrats will also take to the stage in Chicago, including President Joe Biden and First Lady Jill Biden, Bill and Hillary Clinton, and Barack and Michelle Obama. Security around the convention area has been ramped up as demonstrations have been planned outside the venue. Some 40,000 protesters are expected, with the majority opposing Washington's support of or for Israel's war in Gaza. Organizers say the number could swell to more than 100,000. Some groups say they will push for amendments to the Democratic Party's platform. The Harris campaign has so far declined to comment on the protesters' plans.
I encourage people to protest because it needs to be made clear that this genocide that has been happening, that is in month 10, is not acceptable. And if those within the party cannot make it clear to the administration, then those in the street need to make it clear.
Harris, Harris, you will see Palestine will be free.
Protesters had gathered in Ms. Harris's hometown of Oakland, California, over the weekend to call for a ceasefire in Gaza and an arms embargo on Israel. And for more, Simon Marks joins us live from Chicago. Simon, tell us more about what we can expect on this first of 4 days at this convention.
Well, a big night ahead here in Chicago, Wei Su. The Democrats essentially getting some of the awkward, uncomfortable stuff out of the way on the convention's first night. Joe Biden, who was expecting, of course, just a few weeks ago to come here as the president in the midst of his re-election campaign, he was expecting this 4-day made-for-TV spectacular to be all about him, is in fact going to be addressing the convention on the first night. And then we do not think we'll see very much more of him later this week. The first night traditionally attracts much lower television ratings than the other 3 nights of the week. And it's also traditionally the place where the parties like to place speakers that are not necessarily seen as the centerpiece of the event. So we'll hear from him. We'll hear from Jill Biden, the First Lady of the United States, as the party, of course, pays homage to Joe Biden and to what they say are his unparalleled achievements in office. They're also going to be hearing from former First Lady Hillary Clinton here tonight, also consigned essentially to the first night of this convention.
All right, Simon, after, I suppose, the relief of Ms. Harris taking over when Mr. Biden decided to step aside, there will be more scrutiny about the precise plans she has on policy, more specifically, perhaps, the economy. Inflation top of mind right now, her plans not received with as much enthusiasm as might have been hoped.
Well, politically, she walked into a bit of a trap when she made her speech on Friday, unveiling her plans for the economy by talking about the need to cut down on what she referred to as price gouging on food, which the Republicans and Donald Trump immediately took to mean that she was essentially planning price controls. So they immediately branded her a communist in the style of Eastern European leaders, suggesting to Americans that her policies were going to lead to long lines for food and shortages at supermarkets all over the country. Now, of course, Kamala Harris was not actually proposing price controls. Her plans to try and combat price gouging were left somewhat opaque in the speech, but certainly it provided the Republicans and her now rival in this race, Donald Trump, to launch that new opening against her. And I think that they will seek to try and damp some of that down this week by focusing on what Kamala Harris will argue is an unprecedented economic recovery here in the United States, the envy of the world, she will say, even as there are worrying signs that have some economists fearful that the United States might still be on a path to a possible recession later this year in the first quarter of 2025.
All right, in terms of numbers, nationwide and in individual states as well, Ms. Harris is she certainly pushed back Mr. Trump's, I suppose, his progress made in the earlier months. How will this convention define the contest going forward? What should we be looking out for?
Well, it's going to be a problem. It's going to be a problematic few days for Kamala Harris because she's got to do two things. On the one hand, she's got to pay fulsome tribute to Joe Biden, as she's been doing for the last 3 weeks. But then, once that's out of the way, she's also got to make it clear that she sees herself now as the Democratic Party leader. She's got essentially to introduce herself still to many members of the country, of the electorate who have been on holiday over the last couple of weeks, who may not have been as excited by every twist and turn in her journey as those people back in Washington who obsess about politics have been. So this is a massive opportunity for Kamala Harris, but there are also threats here, and they come in the form of her plans for Gaza and for the Middle East. Again, she's been opaque. She says that she's not going to remain silent about the issue in Gaza, but what she says when she speaks about the issue in Gaza is unclear, and that takes us to this issue about the platform, the party's manifesto for this election. The platform that she has inherited is Joe Biden's platform. It was all negotiated and written weeks and months ago. And so those protesters who are descending on Chicago, determined to try and secure a completely different line towards the Middle East, they want to influence the platform conversation and essentially to reopen the discussion about the section within it relating to foreign policy and the Middle East. So that is going to be a big issue for her over the next 96 hours.
But Ms. Harris has so far shown concern for the humanitarian situation on the ground, but is perhaps less precise on how exactly Washington's support for Israel will continue in the weeks, days, months ahead. Could she seek this convention in the next, as you say, these few hours to tweak Washington's policy towards Israel so that it continues its support but somehow meets some of the demands made by the at least 40,000 protesters right now in Chicago?
Look, again, it's difficult because she's not able to tweak the current policy because the current policy is the policy of her boss, President Joe Biden, who remains in office until January of 2025. And he certainly would find it difficult to engage in the kind of policy U-turn that all of those protesters are demanding. The other issue that Kamala Harris faces is a desire not to get boxed in by whatever she says here, not to cause stress and duress for the Biden team back in Washington, but also to give her own foreign policy team a chance to think about all of this. Remember that her foreign policy team is primarily made up of Atlanticists. They're people who believe in the importance of the transatlantic alliance between the United States and Europe. Where they stand on issues like the Middle East, on issues like America's role in the Asia-Pacific region, that is also still somewhat opaque, given the extraordinary haste with which they, like Kamala Harris, have had to come to grasp with the fact that within a matter of months, they may well find themselves running a government. So I think the eyes of the protesters will certainly be on what she has to say here this week about the Middle East, but the eyes of everyone else will be on those words as well to get a sense of just how different she plans her policy to be from the approach that Joe Biden has taken.
I think that Simon Marks reporting live from Chicago the next 96 hours, as we say, looking for more exact precision on where she is certainly on foreign policy.